Did you know the sitcom could have been invented by Aristotle? He wrote a book about stories called Poetics, and he said that stories need a complication. But Aristotle wasn't writing sitcoms for the ancient Greeks, so allow me to add a rule. The funniest complications should be self-inflicted. That's the key warning here, and a place where a lot of writers make a mistake. In fact, normally 2 or 3 mistakes that we're going to cover in this video surrounding this idea of problems, complications in the plot. Now, in previous videos, I've said that your story doesn't even start until there's a pursuit, until your character goes after a particular thing in their own particular way, according to their passions. And that is what causes problems. There are going to be problems with this pursuit. Now, have the characters cause their own problems. It's always better if the problem is caused by the character rather than being bad luck, or as Aristotle would call it, a complication. I often read scripts that make this mistake. The protagonist's problems are not self-inflicted. And the reason it's so important is because we're invested in the character, and rather than just them being the victim of circumstance. Let me explain with an example. Let's take a character called Edward, who is doing a good deed for an old lady to prove to his girlfriend that he's a good person. Doesn't make him sound like a good person, does it? But he wants to have kids, so he wants to prove he's a good dad to his girlfriend. So he says he's going to take an old lady shopping. He parks his car on her street so he can take her to the shops. It takes him longer than expected to get her out of the house, and by the time they get to the car, he's got a parking ticket. Or worse, he's discovered that his car has been clamped. That's a complication. Aristotle might be happy, but I'm not. That's bad luck. Edward doesn't deserve that. Even if he's a jerk or is impatient, he didn't know about the parking restrictions that might have been obscured by a tall van or something. So this is news to him. This is a bit of bad luck. This is a complication. So it would be better if Edward is doing this thing, even though his heart really isn't in it. He's just kind of proved himself to his girlfriend. And because of that, he's running a bit late. He doesn't see the sign. And by the time the lady is ready, he's furious. And that's your complication. We're going to improve that in a minute. But is your plot relying on bad luck? Common mistake. Your character is running a thing at work and the fire alarm goes off. And then the sprinklers come on. Well, that's not their fault if it's faulty equipment. So it's not actually funny because it's not their fault. So that's mistake number 1. Here is mistake number 2. The problems don't multiply. Have the characters make their pursuit harder and harder. I often read sitcom scripts that are just a series of unfortunate events, and they kind of don't really compound. One thing starts and finishes, and then it's on to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, which is okay. You do need more than one problem in your sitcom script, but they should compound. They should multiply. So let's say Edward hasn't been clamped, but there's a traffic warden who is standing there about to give him a ticket. In actual fact, the traffic warden could have been persuaded to overlook this infringement with the old lady there, but Edward's got a short temper, he has an argument, and the warden now feels threatened, and he calls in support, and the car is not just clamped, but towed away. He now can't pick up his girlfriend later, which proves her point. It makes it even more clear that he's not ready to be a dad. Now it's his fault, and he's lost his car. And so maybe, let's go further, he lies about the old lady, says he needs his car, and he says that she's having a medical emergency, at which point the traffic warden calls his bluff and calls an ambulance. And then, they have to go into the ambulance. Edward's now in trouble. Inside the ambulance, Edward then tries to get them to stop off at Sainsbury's so that they can do the shopping, and so on. One problem causes another, and it gets worse and worse. Edward's now in trouble with the old lady, his girlfriend, the traffic warden, and at some point the paramedics, who are going to be furious with him that this old lady isn't actually sick at all. And so here's the third mistake you can make. You might think, oh, let's make the old lady fruity and exciting. No. Don't do that. The temptation is often to cause a problem by having another character kick off and cause a problem and suddenly become an issue. Resist that urge. Why? Because we're not actually invested in that other person. We're not invested in that character who's not going to be in any other episode. Now, I know Seinfeld does really good one-off characters, but don't worry about that for now. If you're Larry David, then fine, you can do that. But for the rest of us mortals, don't get carried away with these other characters because the audience are not invested in them. I've seen it myself. I've sat in audiences for scripts that I've written and I've given jokes to a day player who's come in, really funny stuff, and the audience just doesn't go for it because they love their characters and they want to see how they get on. So resist that urge to give your side characters lots of jokes. All of the problems of your protagonist should be self-inflicted and they should be compounding. They should come from character and their relationships, and we'll dig more into that next time. So bear that in mind as you're trying to find the perfect plot for your pilot. We talked about that in the last video. We made a big long list of plots for your sitcom. Don't forget, we went through that big long list there about how to come up with 100, 150, 200 plots. And so have a think about which of those would be a really good pilot script. But think about how your character can make it worse. As you're developing those stories, think about what your character is going to do in character, pursue their particular passion in a way that's going to be a real problem for them. Aristotle was right, kind of. We need complications, but they must come from character, not fate, not bad luck, not providence, not the gods. I hate to clarify Aristotle, but you are welcome. You can go over to the Situation Room, sign up for the email, and you'll be alerted when the next video drops. And you'll also find out about webinars that I run on how to write sitcoms. Thanks for watching. Speak to you next time.